First Paw Media. You are listening to Mushing on First Paw Media. Visit our website at mushing.com.
Hello and welcome everybody. This is Robert and I'm here with my co-host Michele, and we are continuing our Iditarod 2024 coverage here on the Burled Arch, and we are currently hosting from the road. It is our celebrated wedding anniversary, so we're at one of the new restaurants in Anchorage, Alaska. Michele, how's it going today?
It's going great, Robert. What a fabulous day. We've gotten some work done. We traveled in. We did a little bit of shopping for some necessities, because that's how you have to do it when you live so far out.
So it has been a very busy day, positive and we could say negative today here in Iditarod, but as we always do, in first place we have Dallas Seavey, followed by Jesse Holmes, Travis Beals, Matt Hall, and Paige Drobny, and pulling up the rear we have Bryce Mumford, Joshua Robbins, Connor McMahon, Jeff Reed, and Benjamin Good. So a lot has happened, as we said, on the trail. The first thing is we have our first scratch, and that is Erin Altemus. She scratched in Ruby. Evidently, she was leaving at about 9 o'clock in the morning or so local time, and I assumed that she was heading down back onto the river, and she said that was it. It's time to pull the plug. She didn't know if she could make it the rest of the way, so she had to scratch on behalf of the health of her team, as they all say.
And herself.
And herself. And if you recall, a few days ago, she was really struggling with that dog psychology that we talked about, just getting dogs to run and lead and shifting leaders around and doing all that sort of stuff. And I gave pretty good commentary about just how difficult that can be on a race. There is nothing more challenging than being in the middle of nowhere and you're constantly stopping every 3 or 4 miles and having to switch out your leaders. I know I have been there. Michele, you have been there as well, haven't you?
Not as badly as you have, as I don't typically run ever more than 8 dogs, and so you're less likely to have those issues. Plus, I don't usually run more than 20 miles. I will also note for everyone, Robert, that on the press release, it did mention that she had a tummy bug, and the dogs also had a tummy bug that she was fighting there in Ruby, and had been hopeful that her dogs would have kicked it, but they did not, and so she made the decision in the best interest of herself and her team to go ahead and call it a race.
So they did do a pretty good post over on their Facebook page, and they said that it was very difficult to get to Iditarod, and they don't know what is next. They just want to get Erin back to Anchorage, and of course the dogs back here safe and sound, and then they will have to reevaluate much later after the season. And remember, they live way north of Minnesota, and I can only imagine...
Minneapolis.
No, they live in Grand Marais, Minnesota, so way north.
In Minnesota.
Yes, so they are going to have to reevaluate and figure out what's happening in the near future. But this, unfortunately, may be a one and done for Erin, but we hope not.
We do hope not. We always want people to enjoy the sport of dog mushing, and that doesn't necessarily always mean that you need to do the 1,000-mile race or any of these long-distance races. They can fully go home, continue running on those Gunflint trails, maybe do the John Bear Grease again, and, their young daughter is going to be able to grow up with a wonderful lifestyle.
So next up, Jesse Holmes wins the Ryanair Gold Coast Award. That is the first musher to meet the coast. He did that around 12:30 Alaska time when he arrived in Unalakleet. And Ryanair is one of the smaller feeder type airlines up here in Alaska, and I believe they also offer flights over in Europe, if I'm correct. Maybe that's another Ryanair. I'm not sure. Let us know in the comments if we have got that wrong. But Jesse won 1 ounce of gold nuggets valued at over $1,500, and a beautiful wood carved loon. And we talked about the first fish award that was won yesterday by Travis Beals, and they had a picture over on the Iditarod Insider of that wood carved and wood burned salmon, and that was pretty cool looking. And as we mentioned, they have some really cool artwork, don't they?
They absolutely do. And I know that that is a huge deal to the mushers when they are getting some of these coveted prizes along the trail. And they uphold these pieces of artwork with so much pride. It goes beyond just being first to the coast or first to Ruby or first to Cripple. It really does go beyond that. It has to do with feeling honored to receive such a wonderful piece of art.
For sure. Up next, we have some sad news to report, and that is that one of the dogs died on Isaac Tedford's team. He was bib number 15. He's running a team out of Dallas Seavey's kennel from Willow, approximately 200 feet from the Nualto checkpoint. The dog's name was Bog. He was a 2-year-old male. He collapsed right there, very near the checkpoint. Iditarod veterinarians approached the team and attempted CPR for 20 minutes, but unfortunately, Bog did not survive. They did say that a necropsy will be conducted by a pathologist when he goes back to Anchorage. And that is a sad day, of course, for Isaac and Dallas's teams, of course. But it's been a while since we've had a dog that has died on the race. I think we went a couple of years, maybe 3 years. I'm not sure exactly. But this is becoming less and less common. But unfortunately, this has happened this year. And I want to talk about Rule 42. And that is the expiration of a dog on the trail. Now, we do not know, because it was not listed in the press release, but it says that the Iditarod firmly holds that no dog should suffer harm or death in connection with the race. However, it is understood in rare circumstances that dog harm or dog death can occur through no fault of their musher. Therefore, our policy states that if a dog expires, an immediate voluntary scratch by the musher with the right of assistance under Rule 10. What that means is if they do scratch, that Iditarod will make sure that the musher and their gear and their dogs are flown back to Anchorage or back to Nome, depending on which side of the trail they're on. B, withdraw with the right to assistance under Rule 51. Such withdrawal does not imply any deliberate misconduct or violation set forth in Rule 51, unless the death was caused and determined by the race marshal to be due to inherent risk of wilderness travel. Example, moose encounter, nature of the trail, or force beyond the control of the musher. These causes are referred to as unpreventable hazard. And then it does talk about that the chief veterinarian will perform a necropsy, and if that's not done, they will hold the tissues and whatnot. And any dog death will be reviewed within 30 days of the race conclusion by the dog care panel, consisting of 3 independent investigators with consultation from the race marshal, chief veterinarian, and any other professional experts deemed to be necessary by that panel. The musher will also be consulted and allowed to present input to the dog care panel. The dog care panel shall issue a report to the ITC board discussing the conclusions on the cause of death in order to gain insights that may help shape the future race rules and protocols to achieve 0 dog deaths. The dog care panel should also make a determination in its report on whether disqualification is warranted under the standards set forth below. and it talks about the different types of neglect, and that is heat stress, hypothermia or hypothermia, etc., and of course abuse. So obviously at this juncture, this was released at about 3 p.m. Alaska time, the press release. Nothing else has been reported, but we wanted to make sure that we shared the rule in case it does come up in the next 24 hours, and then we see on the standings that Isaac Tedford has scratched. And I know that a lot of mushers will scratch regardless. You know, that's a big deal to them if one of their dogs passes away. Remember, these guys and gals have spent many years with these dogs, training and bonding with them and all that. So they are truly part of the team. And when one of them passes away, that becomes a big deal, and I would imagine will cause a heck of a lot of psychological toll and a reason for them to scratch as well. Michele, you have something to add?
I do, Robert. It needs to be noted that Isaac isn't just a new musher to mushing. He has spent 5 years with Dallas's kennel, and therefore it also does mention here that all of the dogs that he is running in this race, he has been with them since they were born. And so that's an important thing to note. He didn't just jump on the runners, do his qualifiers, and go to this race. Dallas really wanted to see if the kid had some moxie and could handle himself out there. And so that says a lot in the fact that Isaac knew Bog and has a relationship with Bog, a pretty deep relationship. And so I am wondering, you know, he's got to be torn up from this and probably just waiting there at that checkpoint that he had been pulling into. He hasn't moved from that checkpoint, am I right? And so in that situation, I'm sure they are going to determine if the dog suffered from aspiration, could have had a seizure. There's a lot of things that can go into play to discover what could unfortunately cause a dog death. It doesn't necessarily mean overexposure to cold temperatures or anything like that. Typically it has to do, in Iditarod racing cases, it has to do with aspiration on food or even saliva. And so then that means that he may have been running the dogs a little too hard. Now, I'm obviously speculating, everyone, so we just want to make sure that everybody understands. We have 2 dogs in our kennel that suffer seizures. We've shared the story before where one of them did actually fall over exactly the way they've described in Isaac's situation, and the musher that had been mushing that team that day jumped off and performed CPR on our dog Honcho, and he was luckily revived and still living in our kennel today. This happened some 5 years ago. However, Honcho does not run. He's retired because he has seizures. We did not know he had seizures, but if a dog has a seizure on the race, unbeknownst to the dog musher, from not having it have one previously, then it can cause the dog to die. And so that's a hard one to deal with.
So obviously this is a developing story, and we will definitely make sure that we cover that over on our Facebook page, Mushing Magazine for sure. Let's hope that everything turns out okay, and everything is ready to rock and roll moving forward with Isaac. I'm sure that like we said, he's absolutely devastated with this. And remember, as Michele said, sometimes these are congenital issues. I remember a couple of years ago that Lance Mackey had a couple of dogs die on the trail, and they did the necropsy and all of that, and they ended up finding out that it was a heart issue or a respiratory issue, something that was not even found on the EKGs or anything that they do at the vet checks. And remember, guys, that these dogs go under pretty rigorous checks before they race. They all have to do blood work and EKGs and physical exams and All their vaccinations, of course, have to be up to date. So this is not just signing up for, a local 5K, and I know that's diminishing it a lot, but it's not like you walking up and saying, "Yep, I'm ready to run. I'm pretty healthy. Let's rock and roll." This is like a full-on vet exam. I would make it akin to when you have kids in sports and they have to go to their doctor and get a pretty decent exam before they are able to sign up for football or soccer or whatever. And fortunately, a lot of childhood illnesses are found at those sports physicals. So hopefully that is found out and they are able to move forward. So up next is, before we go there, Michele, do we have any other news that we want to report?
I don't know. I think that it is of note that we are dealing with some wind and some negative 40-degree temperatures between Caltag and Unicalete, and so they are heading into a storm out there through that Caltag Portage area.
Yep, and if you looked at the tracker early this morning, you saw a heck of a lot of people holed up at Old Woman Cabin. They were resting there. There are a couple of shelter cabins along that stretch there. I think it's about 85 miles or so through that portage, and it can be quite hairy through there. There is a lot of stories about Old Woman Cabin. Sort of the lore is that when you stop by, you leave candy for the old woman. That way it'll provide good passage. I think that goes way back to the biblical times when you would provide coins for passage to the netherworld, if you will. So I think it's a very similar story to that. But that's definitely on my bucket list, is to one day make it to Old Woman Cabin to see what that's all about. And if you remember, guys, that I guess it was last year that this, right around this area, was the area where the mushers brought the dogs into the shelter cabins, and it caused quite a bit of hubbub.
Was that last year? Last year was the southern route.
Yep, it was up here on this section of trail, and it caused quite a bit of hubbub. There was some time penalties and monetary penalties and police reports and a whole lot of drama happening because of this ordeal. And you can definitely find out more about that not only on our podcast. We were still hosting on our Mushing radio feed back then, but you can definitely find out more reports about that online for sure. But man, there is never a day where there is not just a little bit of Iditarod drama.
You know, Robert, if everybody heard Anna Barrington's 90-second interview with me that you have already posted in its full entirety on a show a few nights ago, Old Woman Cabin and Tripod Cabin, that's where she wanted to get to.
Yeah. If you get there, you're doing pretty good. You're in that third just about, and we've talked about that. Once you reach the coast there, it's a different race, and that's where a lot of these front runners are. As we mentioned, Jesse Holmes got the award for being there first, and Dallas rolled into Unicalete and rolled right back out. He didn't even stay for a pizza. So things are happening up there, and there was a great commentary early this morning. I woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and it was just a few minutes after Danny Seavey wrote a big-time post about, does Dallas have a chance? Now, of course, he is definitely going to pump up his brother, but man, this guy, he is by far one of the most experienced Iditarod commentators out there on social media.
Well, his Iditamath statisticians stuff was spot on. He not only talked about Dallas's runs, but the top 4 or 5 mushers that are out there with him, and he really dialed in on it took them this long to get from this checkpoint to that checkpoint. And then he gave you the numbers for everybody on there, and he mentioned, the experience and their race stats and all of that, which was great.
Yes, for sure. So definitely check out Danny Seavey's post over on Facebook. So now we are going to drop one of those quick interviews that Michele did out on the trail. This is Laurel Ecklund. This is his rookie run, but he is not a rookie musher by any stretch of the imagination. He has been doing mushing for a very long time. His dad, Neil, is a very accomplished musher as well. And I believe when we talked about him in early coverage, he even had a series on History Channel or Nat Geo, one of those channels, where they followed them on the Yukon. So definitely check that out as well.
One thing about Laurel does not refer to himself as a dog musher. He gives you guys some great tips about how you should handle yourself out there in the wilderness. He said you definitely need to be a woodsman.
A woodsman. So let's check it out.
Good morning, I'm with Laurel Ecklund, and he is just about ready, looking like he's packing up. Laurel, what's your favorite item to take along with you on the Iditarod Trail?
The dogs.
That's a fair answer.
Yeah.
But what's your personal favorite item?
That's a tough one. I don't really, probably at my booties, my little goose down booties for walking around a checkpoint. Those are a godsend right there when you need to dry out your gear and you got something you can still go and mess with your gear and whatnot.
So I'm going to let you off the hook. Robert would say that exact same piece of equipment. He would say those down booties. He might add Crocs to that.
Yeah.
In the checkpoint, and so that's great. Other than that, I want to know a couple of things. What is your favorite checkpoint to get to?
Well, I don't know. I think favorite checkpoint by the sound of it is Uniclete with all the apparently it's the most comfortable checkpoint. So that'll be it right there.
Yeah, and the pizza, of course, right? What's your favorite topping on pizza?
I guess my favorite topping would be sausage.
Sausage, reindeer sausage or pork sausage?
Either or. No, I'm a good eater like a lot of my dogs.
That's fantastic. Last question I have for you is, if you had to give somebody advice that wanted to run this race, what's the one piece of advice you'd give them?
To make yourself feel a lot more comfortable out here, take your time to get some woodsmanship skills down. Actually take some travel more with your dogs. Don't just do a race. Actually learn how to travel with the dog team and do this sort of stuff. Because at the end of the day, you're going to be. This is a race, but you still got to be a woodsman. And you got to be that person that you might be a good racer, you know how to race, but you got to be that person that if you're going on an expedition with anybody, you want to make sure, hey, I can go out on a trip with that guy. Not just I can go out and do a race. So you want to be that person. So, gain some skills. You don't need to be bush crap, but just get comfortable out in the wilderness.
You know what? That was fantastic advice. I really love that. You said, become a woodsman. What a fantastic answer. I appreciate your time today and wish you luck on the race. Laurel, anything else you'd like to say?
That's about it. Not much. Thanks for everybody tuning in and all the volunteers and my sponsors and all the other guys out here racing. I really look forward to getting on this trail finally.
Well, thank you so much.
Okay, guys, I hope you enjoyed that. We have a few more of those interviews to go through our coverage. And remember, we will be on every single night all the way through the banquet. I know the other media outlets will have other stories to cover, especially the bigger media outlets like the news channels and whatnot. They typically roll up right after the first few teams are in Nome, but we will be here through the end, so hopefully you stick with us. Definitely tell your family members and friends about us, and we hope you are enjoying our coverage. It's been a wild year for us. We have been on the road several nights. We have been apart from hosting, and we have husband and wife banter and everything going back and forth, so it has been a fun first week of coverage. If you remember, last week was the Iditarod restart, and that was when Michele and I drove out to Yetna and had quite the afternoon there, and we got a couple of interviews there as well. So, Michele, any other news before we talk about our musher profile of the evening?
Give that map one last look, Robert. Let's see what's going on before we dive into our musher profile. And I think everyone will enjoy my choice this evening.
We are in the same spot. We have Dallas Seavey at mile 724, who is resting. Jesse Holmes is 10 miles back, is also resting. Travis Beals at the same spot, resting. And Matt Hall and Paige Drobny all at 714. So 714 is the Unicleat checkpoint, and Dallas is about 10 miles out of that checkpoint. And we have our back of the packers are about 170-ish miles or so behind the pack. So it looks like Bryce is at 543, Josh is at 545, and Connor McMahon and Jeff Reed are very close together at 545, 546. So we have that group of back of the pack mushers sort of traveling together, if you will. A couple of miles are separating them apart. So, Michele, who do we have tonight?
We have Severin Cathry, who is from Switzerland. Now, he became interested in dog mushing and all things of the north around 2010, when a few of his college friends started moving to Canada. So he came down here as well, and he wanted to see Alaska, not just Canada. And he really got inspired to get into dog mushing. Now, he is handled for a few mushers. He has also partnered up with the Sanderson family kennel and is living currently out of Willow. Now, he is a rookie musher this year in Iditarod. He is 37 years old and really does enjoy being with the dogs. He only has one dog that he has is retired sled dog who is staying with his father back home. So, Severin, one of his greatest achievements, he says, is getting married. He decided to run the 2024 race. He says he has about 850 hours, which I need to decrease until next summer. So I decided to do another mushing season in Alaska. So that must have to do with his visa. He will tell you that he looks up to mushers like Dan Caduce and Riley Deich, Luther Burr, and Al Eichens and Sven Holtman. So lots of big names out there have inspired Severin, and we wish him well on the race. Robert, whereabouts is he?
He is at mile 580, running currently, as we speak, at 9.1 miles an hour. So he is rocking and rolling down the trail. He has 13 dogs in harness, 395 miles to go. So he is just about there at that proverbial third, if you will. So he's moving quite well down trail, and we wish him the best. I don't know much about Severin. I did know he was from Switzerland, and I always like it when folks have the opportunity to travel over. We have a couple of international mushers this year, but not as many as years past. And I think that COVID really put a damper on that. In years before COVID, we would see several mushers from several different countries, and they always put up the flags there at the Iditarod restart, and I would imagine at the finish as well. And I didn't see a lot of international flags there, so hopefully in the next few years that will increase. I love seeing the Japanese flag that we had a couple of years ago. That's pretty dang awesome when you have somebody from Asia that is running. Maybe we will have some of those guys as well. So the goal is, guys, everybody should be working their way to the coast or on the coast within the next 24 hours. We should have a winner sometime early Tuesday. Michele and I were supposed to go to Nome, but we ended up finding out that we could not get room accommodations until the 13th, which would be the day after the expected finish. So we decided that we were not going to go to Nome. We are going to go next year. And in fact, we reserved our hotel today for 2025 to be there on time for the finish. And our goal, of course, was to cover the finish for Mushing Magazine, and we are going to be live and in person there next year. And that also comes into play on just how dang expensive airfares were this year to Nome. The last time I checked, which was a few weeks ago, they were $500 a flight per person. So well over $1,000 with taxes and fees for each person to get to Nome. And we've flown to Nome a lot this year with our purchase of Mushing Magazine, and typically we can go for about 5,000 Alaska airline miles, but I do not remember it being $500 a person. So that's really Iditarod inflated or very expensive just in terms of air travel in general. Michele, anything else?
Well, Robert, I think that wraps it up. I think we had some good coverage this evening.
Yep, so we will be back tomorrow. We will be back at the Mushing Magazine World Headquarters going into week 2 of our Iditarod coverage right here on the Burled Arch Podcast. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe wherever you are listening, and please tell your family members and friends. We will see you guys tomorrow. Goodbye.
Nobody covers dog sledding like Mushing from First Paw Media. Our team of athletes, volunteers, race organizers, and mushers like Robert and Michele Forto brings you closer to the sport. If it's happening, we are there. Live from the qualifying races in January and February, the Iditarod in March, and in the summer, Mushing takes you on the road with our team and trail tour. We connect you with a history of the sport, in-depth interviews with the top mushers, and great storytelling and breaking news all year long. Follow on mushing.com.